Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. Here I talk about regimental colours as I paint Ceglan Varl of the Tanith First and Only. Now this is one of the miniatures from my first batch of ghosts, and as such the painting steps are a work in progress. As I work my way through the regiment, I'm learning more and more about painting miniatures. Here is a list of the paints I used in this video. I think I'll talk through this step by step and discuss some points that I'm not sure of at the moment. I start with a 50-50 mix of scale colours field grey and game colours black, watered down slightly. In the novels they are described as wearing matte black fatigues, and after I've built up some shadows with oil paints later, I feel this looks like how I think worn fatigues would look by moonlight. I then wet blend Rhinox hide up to Lauren Forest for the cloaks, again fitting in with the theme of earthen colours. The Tanith are described as having a pale complexion, so I start with a base of Ceglan flesh, though honestly I could have taken it even further and made them more ghostly, by perhaps using just my highlight colour of pale skin. All Tanith-born ghosts have very dark hair, so to represent this on the model I'm going to use either Rhinox hide, black, or a mix of the two. I use game colours black to block in all of the parts I want to be black. Las rifles, las pistols, belt buckles, things like this. I then come in with a second layer of my base colour, which is again the 50-50 mix, with all the fatigues and the armour. Then I come in with a second layer of my skin tones. I'm going to use Nuln Oil on the fatigues and the armour. I'm going to use Agrax shade on the cloak and Reichlin Flesh shade on all the skin tones. This is one of the steps I'm not quite sure of, since towards the end of the painting process I start to use oils to build up shadows, and so I'm wondering as I paint this first batch whether painting shadows on shadows is an efficient way to paint. This is the first layer of base colour worked in after the wash. Again it's the 50-50 mix, just keeping to the highest areas. To build up some highlights I do start to glaze Lauren Forest on the highest parts of the cloak, going over the shoulders. Another layer of the base colour, this time with a little more field grey in the mix. Then I begin my first layer of highlights on the skin tones with Ceglan flesh, watered down some. This is one of the steps I'm really not quite sure of yet. It's Vallejo Streak and Grime that I'm using to give the cloak an overall tonal change. It acts very much like a shade. The colour's fantastic, but unfortunately it dries a little bit glossy, something I'm trying to rectify and change in future videos. I use a 50-50 mix of lead belcher and black to get a very muted, dark metallic tone for my Tanith ghosts. Another highlight with a base colour. This is with even more field grey, working in progressively smaller areas. Here I'm starting to stipple on a pure field grey with a little bit of water on the highlights. This is my simple recipe for basing the ghosts. It's a base of Rhinox hide, followed by a dry brush of Gothor brown, and then a dry brush of Baneblade brown. This is the preliminary highlight of Lauren Forest on the cloaks, trying to keep just to the edge and the highest parts of the ridges on the cloak. Whilst I'm here I paint the rim of the base black, and I use Nuln Oil on all the metallics. This is the first highlight of the flesh. It's with game colours pale skin, 50-50 with Ceglan flesh. This is one of the attempts I made to try and dull down the gloss effect on the cloak by painting a thinner medium over the streak and grime. This is a 50-50 mix of Administratum grey and field grey. I stipple and scratch the flak armour, and now with a 3-to-1 mix of pale flesh and Ceglan flesh I highlight the most prominent features on the skin. To achieve the battle scar damage on the flak armour, beneath the original highlights of Administratum grey and field grey, I come in with some very fine lines of Rhinox hide, watered down quite a bit so it flows very easily. This is the final highlight of skin tones, with a watered down scale colours pale skin, just on the very highest parts of the features. Now this is where the fun begins. I use a very old brush to stipple heavily Rhinox hide on the lower third of the cloak and on the knees of the troopers. This is a 5 o'clock shadow I paint on all of the fellas above a certain age. This is made with a 3-to-1 mix of Ceglan flesh and Rhinox hide, watered down to almost a glaze consistency. Now for the experimental face. Using black oil paint thinned with turpentine, I paint all the metallics and areas that would be in the shade if there was a zenithal highlight. In this case, it's under the legs, under the back, under the arms, everywhere where you think they would have a natural shade for. And I use burnt umber and black on the lowest part of the cloak, and then just use turpentine, the thinner, just to feather it up the cloak to kind of blend those colours. Now with the cotton swab dipped in the thinner medium, I just take off some of the oil paints on the metallics, being very careful not to push too hard, because you will remove the paint if you push too hard, and you'll go back to plastic. This is the hard part for me, painting eyes and teeth if it's possible. On this particular sculpt, the eyes are very small and I'm having trouble painting them. My normal technique is to apply the colour of the pupil and then either side dot with white if I can do it. In this case it's very hard, so I'm able just to get 2 dots of white on each eye and the teeth. For the final highlights and the metallics, just to work on those areas that I took back the oils from, I use the same mix, which is the 50-50 lead belcher and black. Just on the highest parts of the metallics here, I use the same colour to try and achieve some scratches on the blade. I made a little mistake, but it's okay, you can just rub it off quickly with some water. Here you'll see Varl all painted. It's rather dark, but I hope you like it. This is the final ghost I painted in the first batch. I learned quite a lot about different painting techniques, especially after about 5 years away from the hobby. I think in future videos I'm going to try and work on some more oil colours. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. I appreciate the support you give me in making this Gaunt Ghost project. Tune in next time for some more Tanith goodness. Yeah, stay safe. Thanks a lot. Peace.